Elisabeth Fritzl, 24 years being tortured by her own father. After a mysterious disappearance in 1984, the young woman was, in fact, locked up 6 meters below her house. In the hands of Josef Fritzl, she had 7 children. On August 28, 1984, the young Elisabeth Fritzl, an Austrian girl of only 18 years old, was reported missing. The police then investigated the disappearance for weeks, and the distressed parents could only hope for some sign of life. It was then that a letter arrived at the residence in which the girl claimed to have run away because she could no longer live with her family. Josef, the girl's father, called the police immediately, stating that his daughter planned to join a religious cult and that the case would be solved. But little did they know that Elisabeth was very close by, locked up 6 meters below the house, and that she would remain there for 24 years. At first he simply kept her locked up, but from the 2nd year onwards he began to rape her. In Elisabeth's first pregnancy, she lost the baby after 10 months, but in the second, after 4 years of captivity, she gave birth to a girl she named Kerstin. 2 years later, another baby was born, a boy named Stefan. The 2 children remained in the basement, receiving weekly rations of food and water, and Elisabeth tried to educate them as best she could. In the next 24 years, Elisabeth would give birth to 5 more children. 1 died shortly after birth, another remained with her, Kerstin and Stefan, and the remaining 3 were taken upstairs, living with Rosemary and Joseph. To throw off suspicion, he would place the children near the house, along with letters from Elisabeth. Because they resembled their supposed grandparents, the defenseless children were never taken into care by social services. The timeline of the case. August 28, 1984. Josef Fritzl lures his daughter Elisabeth into the basement of his home, drugging the then 18-year-old and handcuffing her before locking her up. Elisabeth told investigators that she had been sexually abused by her father even before his incarceration. Date unknown Fritzl and his wife receive a letter in Elisabeth's handwriting stating that they should no longer look for her. Elisabeth told investigators that her mother did not know the truth. Approximately between 1988 and 1989, the first of the 7 children presented, a girl, is born in secret in the basement. The exact date is unknown. Another child, a boy, is born later. 1993. A child is discovered in front of the family home, along with a letter allegedly from Elisabeth stating that she could not care for the child. The baby is then taken in by Josef Fritzl and his wife. A second child appears in 1994. Both are taken in or adopted and raised by their grandparents. 1996. Elisabeth gives birth to twins, but one of them dies shortly after birth. The body is said to have been taken away and placed in an incinerator by Josef Fritzl. 1997. A third child appears in front of the Fritzl family home, and like the other 2, is taken in and raised by his grandparents. 1998. According to press reports, Josef Fritzl goes to Thailand for 4 weeks, one of several trips. Authorities have said that the family in hiding may have run out of food supplies during these trips. 2003, a letter from Elisabeth arrives with the news that she had another child in December 2002. This child, a boy, is said to have been raised in the basement, along with his older brother and sister. Saturday, April 19, 2008. Police issue an appeal to find a missing person, Elisabeth, to contact her parents regarding their 19-year-old daughter, who had been admitted to a hospital in Amstetten with a serious illness. Josef Fritzl told hospital staff that the girl's mother was unable and unwilling to care for her and had left her in front of her grandparents' house. April 19 to 26. According to a police statement, sometime during the week, Josef Fritzl frees Elisabeth and 2 other children from the basement of the house, claiming to his wife that Elisabeth had chosen to return home. Saturday, April 26th, police arrest Josef Fritzl and Elisabeth near the Amstetten hospital, where the 19-year-old daughter is being treated. Elisabeth's children are found in the house. Sunday, April 27th, police announce the arrest of Fritzl on suspicion of incest and kidnapping. All the children found are taken to a shelter, and Elisabeth receives medical and psychological treatment. Fritzl gives the police the code to unlock the hidden door to the basement space where Elisabeth and her children lived, a space made up of a network of small, windowless chambers. All the children, except the eldest daughter who was ill, are reunited for the first time, and Elisabeth is reunited with her mother. Monday, April 28th, Josef Fritzl confesses to having kept Elisabeth locked in the basement for 24 years. He also confesses to having fathered 7 children with her. Fritzl confirms to investigators that one of the children died shortly after birth and that he took the body and put it in the incinerator. Tuesday, April 29th. Police announce that DNA tests confirm that Fritzl is the father of Elisabeth's children. While the eldest daughter remains in hospital in a serious but stable condition, Josef Fritzl appears at a hearing and the judge orders his detention. Authorities report the surprising reunion between Elisabeth, now 42, and 2 of the 3 children who lived with her in the basement, the 18-year-old and 5-year-old brothers with the other children she had. On the same day, hundreds of people in Amstetten take part in a candlelight vigil organized by a local religious school to show solidarity. Wednesday, April 30. Police say Josef Fritzl refuses to answer questions after signing his confession. Elisabeth and her children are being held together in an isolated wing of a medical clinic under 24-hour supervision by a multidisciplinary team. The detainees need to get used to space, light, and, most importantly, a different diet, authorities say. An impromptu birthday party is being held for one of the children, aged 12. Austrian Chancellor Alfred Gusenbauer promises to protect the country's image with a campaign abroad. "We will not allow the entire country to be held hostage by one man," the Chancellor said. Wednesday, October 15th. Prosecutors say Josef Fritzl is mentally fit to stand trial. Authorities say a psychiatric evaluation ordered by the courts showed that Fritzl, 73, showed the lucidity necessary to stand trial, despite suffering from a profound personality disorder. Thursday, November 13th, Josef Fritzl is formally charged with the murder of one of the 7 children he had with Elisabeth. The child is believed to have died in the basement shortly after birth. Prosecutors allege that the boy was killed through negligence because Fritzl failed to seek medical help that could have saved the child's life. Thursday, January 22nd, 2009. Prosecutors say Josef Fritzl will stand trial on March 16th. Monday, March 16th, 2009. Fritzl goes on trial at the court in St. Pölten, Austria, west of Vienna, amid intense media coverage. He admits that he is guilty of rape and incest, but claims he is innocent of the charges of murder and slavery. The doors of the court are closed to the press and the public. Wednesday, March 18th, 2009. Josef Fritzl changes his plea and pleads guilty to all charges, including rape, incest, murder, and slavery. He had initially denied 2 of the charges, including the murder of one of his children shortly after birth. When asked by the judge what led him to change his mind, Fritzl replied that he changed his statement after watching his daughter's video testimony. The Captivity. The place where Elisabeth and 3 of her children were held was built under a house from the 1960s where Josef lived. The basement was about 60 square meters with a small kitchen, bathroom, television, and sleeping space. Access was via a steel door behind bookshelves that could only be opened with an electronic code known only to Fritzl. A soundproofed room was also found there, possibly to prevent voices from being heard from outside the house. According to the police, Fritzl had made it clear to his wife and other children that it was forbidden to try to enter the prison. According to the authorities, he brought food to the prisoners every morning. Freedom in 2008. Freedom came unexpectedly. Kerstin, who was now 19 years old and had never seen the light of day, fell seriously ill. Desperate, Elisabeth begged her daughter to go to the doctor, and Josef reluctantly called an ambulance to save the young girl. At the hospital, Kerstin was questioned about her family. Since the answers were confusing and inconsistent, the police decided to reopen the case of Elisabeth's disappearance. Under pressure from the police, Josef surprisingly decided to release his daughter on April 26, 2008, and she immediately went to the hospital to see Kerstin. That night, taken into custody, Elisabeth told the police her entire story. She explained that her father held her captive for years, forcing her to watch pornography and then raping her. She spoke about her children, both alive and dead, and about the psychological and physical torture she suffered. Josef was immediately arrested. The children were released from the cellar, and Rosemarie Fritzl fled the house for reasons that are still unclear. Today, the victim lives with her children in a secret villa in Austria. She has never given interviews, and despite being over 50 years old, her only known photograph was taken when she was 16. The testimony after 24 years, imprisoned in a 60-square-meter cellar, with no natural light or ventilation, where she was frequently raped by her own father, Elisabeth Fritzl finally testified in an Austrian court about the abuse she was subjected to. Spared from coming face to face with her attacker, she recorded an 11-hour video in which she recounts in detail the horrors she experienced during the 8,461 days of captivity. Due to the highly personal nature of the testimony, the doors of the St. Pölten courthouse remained closed to the press, with the exception of the Austrian news agencies APA and ORF, which were granted access to the courtroom. She said that Fritzl lured her into the basement, which at the time was only 20 square meters in size, with a toilet, a bathroom, and a kitchen, drugged her and handcuffed her. She was then forced to write to her mother saying that she had joined a sect and asking them not to look for her. According to the prosecutor in the case, Christian Berkheiser, the family's living conditions were precarious, and at times Elisabeth Fritzl had to kill rats with her own hands to defend her children. In addition to Josef Fritzl and his lawyer, 3 judges and 8 jurors watched parts of the video testimony recorded by Elisabeth. The testimony of one of the victim's brothers, the only member of the family who agreed to testify in the case, was also shown on tape. The rest of the family refused to testify. No details were released about the defendant's reaction, who only revealed that he followed the screening with all attention and care, answering the questions asked. During the screening of the video, the jury, the prosecutor, and Fritzl's defense also questioned a neonatologist about the defendant's alleged responsibility for the death in 1996 of one of the 7 children he had with Elisabeth. Based on the victim's testimony, the prosecution argues that Fritzl ignored his daughter's requests to bring medical help for the newborn due to the respiratory problems she was suffering. Elisabeth's testimony is essential for the trial of the Austrian known as the Monster of Amstetten. According to a judicial spokesperson, the document was recorded by Elisabeth over several days, and the experience was very stressful for her. Development. Elisabeth and her children received new identities. In order to avoid being recognized and to be able to start a new life, Elisabeth and her children received new identities. They would be living in a town about 100 kilometers from Amstetten, listed in official documents only as Village X. "It is very important that they are left in peace," said the doctor who treated the family at the hospital. 10 years after the crime, in March 2019, the Austrian newspaper Österreich said that Josef was still in prison, but at the age of 83 he was suffering from dementia. The newspaper also wrote that Elisabeth was married, that her eldest daughter, Kerstin, then 29, was dating. Stefan, 28, was planning to become a merchant seaman, and another of the sons was working at the Amstetten City Council. An Austrian court in 2024 said it had ruled that the country's most infamous criminal, incestuous rapist, Josef Fritzl, could be transferred from a prison psychiatric unit to a regular jail. Despite the move, his release is unlikely. The 89-year-old is serving a life sentence in a prison unit for mentally abnormal inmates. While a transfer could in principle pave the way for Fritzl's conditional release from prison, the court said such a request was unlikely to be approved due to special precautionary reasons. Fritzl's lawyer, Astrid Wagner, said she would apply for such a release within a year of his transfer. He no longer poses a threat that requires him to be held in a forensic therapeutic center, the court said, using a more recent term for where he is being held. The court cited his advancing dementia and frailty as factors. In the same ruling, the three-judge panel also ruled that a conditional release from regular custody, i.e., a release, is not possible for special preventive reasons, the statement said, referring to the unprecedented criminal energy he had used. Therefore, it was not to be expected that he would be released altogether, the statement said. At a hearing in a court in the town of Krems an der Donau, near Vienna, in January, the court allowed Fritzl's transfer, only for a higher court to overturn that decision in March, ruling that the facts necessary for such a conditional release had not yet been established.